Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my hidden gems for Week 7 of the 2020 fantasy football season. And last night on Thursday Night Football, between the Philadelphia Eagles and New York Giants, the snap occurred once again. And not only caused things like this to happen, but it also caused many of the players going into Week 7 that are currently in our starting lineups to have injuries that occurred to them and have designated them out going into this upcoming week. The amount of injuries to players like Joe Mixon, Michael Thomas, Austin Hooper, it continues to rack up. Players are going from healthy to questionable all of a sudden on Friday. So that in itself is definitely worrisome. But on today's episode, we're going to be going out and we're going to find all 6 hidden gems, all 6 sleepers that in my opinion can not only just be picked up in your potential league this week because they're all owned in less than 40% of Yahoo leagues as of this moment in time, but these are players that can, for the upcoming weeks, help your rosters out, help you pick up wins, because not only are these injuries going to play a factor, the COVID situation, but also the bye weeks that are looming. So again, on today's episode, we're going after sleepers. We are going to collect all 6 hidden gems, put together the fantasy gauntlet, and reclaim a victory here in Week 7. Now, before we begin, I want to thank you guys for the incredible support. For those of you who have continued to support the channel, thank you very much. For those of you who are over there at Patreon supporting me, I can't thank you guys enough. You guys have been absolutely fantastic. We got a lot of exciting things coming around the corner for the channel, so I really do appreciate it. For those of you who have not yet already, subscribe to the channel. I mean, that is the biggest way to stay up to date on latest content. We're making 2020 fantasy football content here on the daily. So again, if you're looking for fantasy football content, a way to try to capture a 2020 fantasy football championship, make sure you click that subscribe button, comment down below, click the like button down below. It really does help me out a lot. All right, let's do this, shall we? I'm ready to talk about some 6 hidden gems. Obviously, to the left of me, you can see Giovani Bernard, running back of the Cincinnati Bengals. As of this morning, there was a little information looming whether or not Joe Mixon was going to be able to play this upcoming week. And as of this morning, Joe Mixon was given the out designation due to the foot injury that he sustained against the Indianapolis Colts last week. Now, we traveled to Xandar, aka Cincinnati, to collect Giovani Bernard, who is available in majority of your leagues probably. He's only owned in 37% of Yahoo leagues as of this moment in time. And the thing that I wanted to point out first and foremost is the opportunity that he is walking into. He is going to be a starting running back for this organization this upcoming week. And it's not like we haven't seen Giovani Bernard step into these kind of situations. We go back to 2018 when Joe Mixon had gotten hurt for 2 weeks. Giovani Bernard came in and in 2 weeks had 27 total rushing attempts, 130 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 13 targets leading to 9 receptions, and 52 receiving yards. He was an incredible fantasy football play in those 2 given weeks. And as since then, obviously seen a little bit less of a role within this offense, but is still the number 2 back. And there's nobody else outside of Joe Mixon and Giovani Bernard getting snaps or touches out of this backfield. So the way that I see this, with Joe Mixon going out potentially this week and missing the next week because they do have a Week 9 bye, there could be a potential that they hold out Joe Mixon until Week 10. This is not only just a pickup for this week, but for the future of the fantasy league. Now, obviously, Joe Mixon owners had kept an eye on it because I talked about it on the waivers episode earlier this Monday. But let's just think about what the potential is for Giovani Bernard. From weeks 4 through 6, Joe Mixon has had 67 rushing attempts, 17 targets that have led to 14 receptions. All in all, he's had 27 touches per game for the last 3 weeks. Imagine that kind of opportunity going in the direction of Giovani Bernard, who's not only a guy that can run in between the tackles and has proven to be a great back in that sense. Even this past week was used on the goal line and scored a touchdown against Indianapolis. He's also a guy that will get it done through the air. Let's not forget, even the last time they played against the Cleveland Browns, again, they played the Cleveland Browns this week, but the last time they played against them was Week 2. Against Cleveland, he had 7 targets and 5 receptions because, again, in that kind of a contest, if in fact the offensive line is not holding up, you have to get involved in the passing game. And Joe Burrow threw the ball 61 times. Of course, Giovani Bernard was going to get more implementation and utilization in the offense. And that's what I think could potentially happen this upcoming week. Now, we talk about the Cleveland Browns matchup. We talk about, obviously, the opportunity of Giovani Bernard. Playing against Cleveland, not one of the tougher matchups, in my opinion. Of course, yardage on the ground, some of these teams have not been able to at least take advantage of it, but mainly because, of course, Cleveland's secondary is their biggest weak point on their defense. So a lot of teams try to target that. But that being said, the Cleveland Browns have allowed 8 rushing touchdowns just this season already to opposing teams. So that in itself, pretty exciting thing to see. I think there's a very good chance that Giovani Bernard is going to be a back that touches the ball upwards of 15, 16 times this upcoming week and gives himself a lot of value because, of course, the PPR work, the goal line touches that are coming down the line. I think this is a fantastic pickup and an absolute hidden gem going into week 7. Okay, now we could throw up Giovani Bernard on the screen, and we can move on to our next hidden gem for week 7, talking about the Space Stone Jamaal Williams. Now, a little bit of information came out earlier today regarding Aaron Jones and the potential of him missing this upcoming week. Now, the reason why this is such an important factor is that Aaron Jones, like many of you saw, is like my number 2 running back going into this upcoming week in terms of the rankings. So if he is not to play because of the calf injury that he currently has sustained, there is a very good opportunity for Jamaal Williams to step up and have an incredible game here in week 7 based purely on the matchup. And I think the sky's the limit, and that is why I have him as this week's Space Stone, because to be honest, he is a rocket and he is just going in the right direction. Just looking at the matchup on hand, they play against the Houston Texans, by far one of the easiest matchups at the running back position. In fact, they give up the second most points to opposing running backs thus far this season, giving up on average 30.67 points to opposing running backs per game in a half PPR scoring format. That's a pretty ridiculous amount of points. Now, a lot of you think, okay, Jamaal Williams, he doesn't get much work in the backfield as of this year. But if we go back to 2019, this is a guy that was averaging over 4 yards per carry for the team, had 5 receiving touchdowns, and was a pretty big part of this offense. It was consistently a flex play on a weekly basis because of his upside. Now, obviously, the utilization of Jamaal Williams has kind of gone down this season, but I think this is a great opportunity to get him back on track and get him more involved within the offense. Of course, it has to do with the fact that Aaron Jones could potentially miss, but even if Aaron Jones doesn't miss, I still think there's going to be a lot of utilization of Jamaal Williams this week. Now, let me tell you about the matchup. Of course, they played against the Houston Texans. Just looking at some of the performances that they've had dropped on them, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 25 carries for 138 and a touchdown. The Ravens' entire backfield, whether it was Mark Ingram, J.K. Dobbins, or Gus Edwards, they combined in week 2 for 21 rushing attempts and 176 and 1 against them. James Conner went for 18 rushing attempts, 109 and a touchdown. Dalvin Cook, 27 rushing attempts, 130 and 2 touchdowns. James Robinson, of course, was probably the lowest performance of the group. Had himself 13 rushing attempts, 48 yards, but still kind of got himself balanced out with 5 receptions for 22 receiving yards. And just this past week, Derrick Henry, 22 rushing attempts, 212 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Of course, we all remember the 94-yard huge play that he had last week. That being said, running backs have feasted against Houston, and I wouldn't be surprised if Jamaal Williams, who's only owned in 34% of leagues this week, as of right now, has a humongous game in week 7. That is why he's our Space Stone. An incredible opportunity for him. I think he could step up and definitely deliver for fantasy owners. So we throw him on screen and we move on to the Reality Stone. We collect the ether from the collector. And here's the thing. Tre'Quan Smith is the first player this year to be the second. This is his second showing on the Hidden Gems feature episode. So even though the first time we talked about Tre'Quan Smith, he didn't really do anything. He was more like he stayed hidden. I really do think that Tre'Quan Smith has a very good opportunity this week because of the reality of the situation at the wide receiver position for, of course, the New Orleans Saints. Michael Thomas, earlier this week on Wednesday, hurt his hamstring. Obviously, he was coming back from the high ankle sprain. The fact that he tweaked his hamstring at practice is not a good sign. He has already been deemed out. On top of that, earlier this morning, Emmanuel Sanders was popped with the COVID-19 a positive test, and he has been moved to the COVID-19 IR list. He will be gone for upwards of 2 weeks. We'll just have to wait and see. Where does that leave the wide receiver position for the New Orleans Saints? Well, it's pretty much Alvin Kamara, Jared Cook, and Tre'Quan Smith. Those are your 3 options within this offense in the passing game. And as it currently stands, it seems like Tre'Quan Smith is the number 1 wide receiver for this team. Since the season has begun, and obviously Michael Thomas went down, Tre'Quan Smith has led all wide receivers on the New Orleans Saints in terms of snap count percentage. So he has always been on the field regardless of whether he's getting targets or not. So the way I see it, now that he's going to be the number 1 wide receiver of this team, sure, he might not get as many targets or receptions as Alvin Kamara, but he's going to have a good amount going in his direction. The last couple of weeks, Emmanuel Sanders had 14 targets in week 5, 9 in week 4. Tre'Quan Smith in week 3 had 6 targets, and in week 2 had 7 targets. Again, he's going to at least have 7+ targets this upcoming week, and there's a lot of upside for his potential play this upcoming week. Now, also, let's not forget, number 1 wide receivers against Carolina, even though Carolina hasn't given up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers this season, number 1 wide receivers have taken advantage of said matchup. I do not think that their secondary is top tier at all. I think they've gotten away with, not giving up a lot of points because teams just run the ball against Carolina because that is the best way of beating them on a weekly basis. Just looking back this season, number 1 wide receivers versus the Carolina Panthers. Mike Evans, 7 catches, 104 yards and a touchdown. Keenan Allen, 13 catches, 132 yards, and a touchdown. Calvin Ridley, 8 catches, 136 yards, and a touchdown. Number one wide receivers can absolutely feast against Carolina. I've seen Drew Brees over the last couple years throw 3+ touchdowns against them. I think Tre'Quan Smith is in line for a pretty big week. Again, only owned in 19% of leagues as of right now. The reality of the situation is that Tre'Quan Smith might be the only wide receiver healthy on that team and ready to go this week. So we throw up Tre'Quan Smith and we move on to the Soulstone. Now, as we all know, we travel to Vormir and we have to make a sacrifice. And unfortunately, this week's sacrifice is a player that was my number 10 overall tight end ranked in yesterday's video, Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper is currently dealing with appendicitis. As it currently stands, he's going to miss this upcoming week and could miss future weeks. The entire conversation around David Njoku as of right now, prior to this entire Austin Hooper scenario, was can David Njoku potentially get traded before the trade deadline? He has been asking for it even to the preseason, and just a couple weeks ago, rumors came out that David Njoku was seeking a trade and wanted to be moved out of the Cleveland organization. So David Njoku is definitely going to be asked to step up and make plays this upcoming week, and it's not something that he is shy of doing. Even though he's only owned in 3% of fantasy leagues right now, David Njoku is in line for a lot of targets just the last couple weeks. In the past 3 weeks exactly, Austin Hooper has had 23 targets, leading to 15 receptions, 143 yards, and a touchdown. That's 27.8 fantasy points. If you divide that into 3, that's a pretty good weekly basis for a tight end. We'll take that for any streaming tight end. And the fact is, David Njoku is probably going to come in and be asked to play 80+% of the snaps. With Jarvis Landry dealing with a rib injury, with Baker Mayfield a little bit beat up, they're going to have to be able to pass the ball and get the ball to their tight ends because that is what they've used over the last couple of weeks. Let's not forget, the Cincinnati Bengals is one of the easiest matchups at the tight end position. In fact, they're giving up the 6th most points to opposing tight ends in a half PPR scoring format. In fact, they're giving up at least 6 total receptions, 60 receiving yards, and a half a touchdown to opposing tight ends every week on average. So again, I look at this as a huge plus for the potential of David Njoku. He's not owned in many leagues. He's a guy that you can easily pick up if you are an Austin Hooper owner and throw into your lineup. Again, the tight end position playing against Cincinnati in the past 2 weeks, there's been 3 receiving touchdowns from tight ends. Mark Andrews had one. This past week, of course, Trey Burton had 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing, 1 receiving, and even Jack Doyle scored against Cincinnati's defense. The tight end position looking juicy this upcoming week playing against Cincinnati, and that is why we sacrifice Austin Hooper to collect the soul stone of David Njoku. We move on to the time stone. Now, a lot of people may be thinking, why is Braxton Berrios a hidden gem this upcoming week? Well, you know, the fact of the matter is that Jamison Crowder has been dealing with an injury, and this isn't the first time that Jamison Crowder could potentially miss a week here. I mean, Jamison Crowder missed both week 2 and week 3 this season. So the reason why I bring up Braxton Berrios isn't because of the fact that he's owned in less than 1% of fantasy leagues right now in a Yahoo format, but because of the fact that Sam Darnold's coming back, and if Jamison Crowder's out, let's remember, Jamison Crowder in the 4 games that he's played this season has gathered 46 total targets. That is an incredible number. I don't think there's any other wide receiver averaging 10+ targets per game, this season at that kind of a level. I mean, Jamison Crowder is an anomaly. So when we think, okay, if Braxton Berrios can get into this conversation and be thrown into this offense as their slot receiver, which he's done in the past, what could we potentially see? Earlier this year, in weeks 2 and 3, when Jamison Crowder was out, Braxton Berrios in the 2 games in week 2 had 8 targets, 6 catches, 59 receiving yards, and a touchdown, totaling for 14.9 points, playing 71% of the snaps. The week after that, week 3, 4 targets, 4 catches, 64 yards, and a touchdown, 14.4 fantasy points, 81% of the offensive snaps. I 150% believe that if in fact Jamison Crowder is out, Braxton Berrios is a pick up and play kind of guy. I really do think if you are in a deeper league and you're running thin, this is a guy that can easily be picked up and thrown into your lineup if in fact you're struggling to find a player to at least, kind of throw in there. Of course, it's very contingent on the idea that Jamison Crowder does miss. If Crowder doesn't miss, then we can go ahead and skip out on Braxton Berrios this upcoming week. But again, I've looked at all 14,605 different outcomes, and the one outcome that works is if in fact Jamison Crowder is out, Braxton Berrios is the play. So we put Braxton Berrios on the screen and we move on to our last hidden gem for this upcoming week. It is the Mind Stone, and cursed with knowledge, I believe Cole Beasley will not only have a great week this upcoming week, but will continue his consistency over the last 2 seasons. Going back to 2019, Cole Beasley was a 10-point play every single week in a half PPR, and even in a full PPR had even more viability on a weekly basis. Thus far this season, Cole Beasley is averaging 6 targets per game, 5 receptions per game, 60 receiving yards per game, and has scored 2 touchdowns in the last 6 contests. So on average, it's about 10 fantasy points per game for Cole Beasley. As of right now, 10 fantasy points could be a huge difference maker for any team, especially those of you struggling with injuries and bye weeks this upcoming week. So again, the fact that Cole Beasley's only owned in 38% of fantasy leagues seems to me like he's an automatic pickup and play, because with John Brown potentially going out this week, which the designation has been pretty much kind of leaned towards. As of this moment in time, I'm not 100% sure if he is out. If the designation is given to him later this afternoon, even better. So I'm expecting him to be out. If that happens, obviously Gabriel Davis steps up as the number 2 wide receiver, but Cole Beasley has been an animal for the last couple of weeks. And the way I see it, they're playing against the New York Jets. The New York Jets defense is not something I'm afraid of. The more and more Josh Allen continues to go to the well of Cole Beasley, the more and more I have confidence in playing him in certain weeks like this. It's not only an advantageous matchup, but it seems to me that if John Brown's out, there's going to be more opportunity for these other wide receivers to feast. And with what Cole Beasley's done over the last couple of weeks, seeing a pretty high volume of targets, of course, 7 or 6 isn't a lot, but the fact that he's catching the majority of these targets makes a huge difference and gives him that much more value in a fantasy format. So as of right now, cursed with knowledge, I think Cole Beasley's a guy that if in fact he's available and you are struggling to find a wide receiver this upcoming week, he could be a guy that could fill in at the flex position and definitely give you the numbers that you potentially need. So we'll throw Cole Beasley on the screen and we'll go ahead and we'll review all of our hidden gems for this upcoming week. These are our hidden gems for week 7 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Again, Giovani Bernard as the power stone, Jamaal Williams as the space stone, Tre'Quan Smith as the reality stone, David Njoku as the soul stone. We have Braxton Berrios as the time stone and Cole Beasley as the mind stone. Again, thank you everybody for watching. We have completed the fantasy gauntlet. Good luck on your games. It should be an exciting week. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.